Assalamu alaikum, Ms. Fatma is speaking. I hope you are in good health. 1,000 teachers, 1,000 methods. There are many methods that are useful, used by teachers to teach foreign language. So teachers should be creative and smart in choosing and using an appropriate approach. Today, inshallah, we'll discuss another approaches of teaching foreign language, which are cognitive code approach and affective humanistic approach. The first part of this lecture is about cognitive code approach. The outlines, are theoretical background, definition, features of cognitive code approach, significance of cognitive code approach, objectives, assumptions, principles, cognitive code approach in the classroom, activities, and strength and weakness of cognitive code approach. Cognitive theoretical background. Cognitive code learning refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning developed in 1960th century. Cognitive psychologists and applied linguists such as Carroll and Kenneth Sheston advocated the cognitive code approach in 1960th century to the study of a second language as an alternative to the audiolingual method prevalent at that time. Also, cognitive code learning theory was based on contemporary developments in transformational grammar and the generative theory of language that developed in the 1950th century and 1960th century. Chomsky was the man who revolutionized in linguistics. Linguists and language teachers toward the deep structure of language, language structure, development of a second language as a combination of skills. Chomsky's theory of a transformational generative grammar, which claimed the language is rule-governed and creative, strongly emphasized rule-governed nature of language and language acquisition rather than habit formation. Also, Carroll and Kenneth Sheston advocated the cognitive code approach to the study of a second language as an alternative to the audiolingual method. According to Carroll, learning a language is a process of acquiring a conscious control of the phonological, grammatical, and lexical patterns of the second language, largely through study and analysis of these patterns as a body of knowledge. Also, the cognitive approach is sometimes is considered the modern version of the grammar translation method. Yes. What is cognitive code? Cognitive approach, in general, cognitive code began to revolutionize psychology in the late 1950th century and early 1960th century to become dominant approach. This approach is a relatively modern approach to human behavior. Cognitive approach is the study of mental processes such as attention, language use, memory, problem solving, creativity, and thinking. A cognitive theory of learning sees second language acquisition as a conscious and reasoned thinking process involving the deliberate use of learning strategies. Cognitive psychology consider the thought process according to different moods and our experience that impact our response to circumstances. Yes, what is cognitive code? Cognitive code is also known as cognitive code learning theory, cognitive code method, cognitive code theory, cognitive code approach. Yes, what is cognitive and what is code? Cognitive acts as an adjective in the sentence. It involves conscious mental activities, for example, thinking, understanding, learning, and remembering. Code acts as a noun or a verb. Code as a noun It's a set of letters, symbols, etc. to send message, as well as it consists of a set of rules or ideas about how to behave. So what is the definition of cognitive code learning? Cognitive code learning refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning. Cognitive code learning theory is accepted as merger of Chomsky's transformational grammar and Carroll's psychology. Yes, here, okay, transformational generative grammar according to Anna Chomsky and Carroll's psychology. Here in a TGG, okay, which means a transformational generative, okay, grammar, depends on that language is rule governed and creative. Language includes deep and surface structure. Competence and performance are important, okay, aspects. According to Carroll's psychology, learning should be holistic. Learning should be a combination of mental and social factors. So, cognitive code equal rules, creative, competence, mental, and social factors. What are the main features of cognitive approach? Yes, in cognitive approach, teachers can use language not as a repetition drill, but as something that a student can create on their own. The main feature of this approach is that teachers provide the necessary tools to their students so they can work on their own with assignments. Okay, in this approach, learning depends upon perception and insight information. The learner tries to solve new problems on the basis learning. What do you mean by problem solving? Here, problem solving refers to the mental process that people go through to discover, analyze, and solve the problems. This involves all steps in the problem process, including the discovery of the problem, the decision to tackle the issue, understanding the problem, and researching the available options and taking actions to achieve your goals. Before problem solving can occur, it is important to first understand the exact nature of the problem itself. One important aspect to be mentioned is that teaching should be subordinated to learning. This approach makes emphasis on the development of vocabulary, grammar, and skills of reading and writing. The cognitive approach refers to the study of mental processes such as perception, memory, feeling, thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. Cognition are all processes by which the individual learns, yes, and imparts meaning to an object or idea. Okay, cognition means knowing. It's very important to pay attention for what is the difference in the meaning of cognition and cognitive process. Cognition means knowing. Here, cognitive process refers to the way in which knowledge is gained, used, and retained. Cognitive psychologists explain all behavior in terms of thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes, and study how these direct our behavior. Yes. Okay, according to internal mental processes, humans are seen as information process. The main concern of cognitive psychology is how information received from our senses, okay, is processed by the brain and how this processing directs how we behave. The cognitive approach also looks at how various cognitive functions work together to help us make sense of the world. Yes, mental processes studied by cognitive psychologists are perception, attention, memory, language, thinking, problem solving. This approach, therefore, investigates those areas of human behavior that were neglected and ignored by behaviorists. What is the significance of cognitive code approach? Yes, the main significance of this approach is that learners' understanding of the structure of the foreign language than to facility in using that structure, because facility will develop automatically with use of the language in meaningful situations. What is the purpose of cognitive code learning theory? Yes, the purpose of cognitive code learning theory is aimed to foster competence, emphasizes the central role of cognition, and the main emphasis is on meaningful practice. The main objectives of this approach are remembering, understanding, applying, evaluating, and creating. Differentiate among behaviorism and cognitivism. Yes. Cognitive code learning method appeared as a reaction to behaviorism, which was based on the proposition that behavior can be researched scientifically. The cognitive code approach arose combining new thinking in psychology, anthropology, and linguistics field. Under this method, English teachers can be more creative and more didactic with their students, and the students can enjoy learning through a no rigorous process. Yes, under this English teaching method is conceived not as a behavior but as a mental process. So the cognitive approach is concerned with how thinking shapes our behavior. Cognitive psychologists explain all behavior in terms of thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, and study how these direct our behavior. They are looking at the internal processes of the mind. Yes, the difference. The main difference among behaviorists and cognitivism. Is that cognitivism concerned with mental processes, concerned with what humans can perceive and communicate. Cognitivism focused on the mind. And the cognitive approach emphasizes the role of learning in behavior, but unlike behaviorism. Yes. Assumptions, of the cognitive approach. This approach developed as a reaction against the behaviorist stimulus response approach. Cognitive psychologists believe it is that events within a person that must be studied if behavior is to be fully understood. Unlike behaviorists, cognitive psychologists believe that it is possible to study internal mental process in an objective way. They are concerned with how thinking shapes our behavior. So, the main assumptions of this approach is that human behavior can be understood by scientific process. Also, human behavior is a series of responses to external stimuli by our thoughts, perceptions, moods, and desires. The cognitive code approach depends on these three terms: thoughts, feelings, and behavior. The relationship among these terms as a chain. Thoughts create feeling. Feelings, create behavior. Behavior reinforces thoughts. An example about that: Emma overhears a remark made in class. She really gets on my nerves. It could have referred to anyone, but Emma automatically thinks that it is about her, assumes that she is unworthy and people don't want to be friends with her. She withdraws from the friendship group and as a result becomes more and more isolated and depressed. So what we think affects what we act and feel. This is okay according to the thought. Emotions, what we feel affects okay how we think and do. Okay, and according to the behavior, what we do affects how we think and feel. Another example here, okay, it is your birthday and you are given a surprise invitation to meet your friends at lunchtime to celebrate. You are disappointed to find your best friend doesn't join you and sends no reason or apology. Yes, هنا according to thoughts, emotions, behavior. Yes, thoughts, yes, negative side. He or she is annoyed with but won't say why you. The positive side, maybe he or she was under pressure with work, etc. Something urgent came up and his or her phone has died. According to emotions, okay, negative, hurt and upset. Perhaps you aren't such okay good friends after all. The positive meaning disappointed, but sure you will get together soon to celebrate. According to behavior, negative meaning, treat him or her with cool detachment next time you meet. But the positive meaning, message or call him or her to arrange to meet. Yes, so we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thought. With our thoughts, we make our world. What are the principles of cognitive code learning theory? Yes, here we have the principles of cognitive code process, which are yes, learning occurs through cognitive memory structures which perceive, process, store for short or long-term recall and retrieve information. Yes, the cognitive code theory is meaningful practice in a second language. Language is taken as complex and rule-governed activity. Learning should be holistic, thinking, comprehension, and memory must be emphasized. Classrooms activities are designed to encourage learners to work out grammar rules. Content over form must be emphasized. Lessons must be highly structured around a deductive process, often giving the rule of the day. Also, cognitive control works as follows. Phonemes are to be learned before words, words before phrases, clauses before sentences, and simple sentences before compound, complex, and compound complex sentences, and so on. And the learner is an active processor of information processing. The learner is centered of the process of teaching and learning. The learner is as a backbone of the teaching and learning process. So learning will only take place when the matter to be learned is meaningful to the learner. Yes, cognitive code theory in the classroom. This approach includes the clear and structured use of concept questions to help learners identify the limits of use of structure and lexes. Teachers still find this useful. The PPP methodology, which means presentation, practice, and production, through which learners gain a clear understanding of a grammatical rule before they practice in meaningful context. It may still suit some learning contexts and teachers. Learning strategies of a cognitive code approach. Here, teacher is asking students to reflect on their experience. Teacher is helping students find new solutions to problem. Teacher is asking students to justify and explain their thinking. A teacher is also helping students explore and understand how ideas are connected. What is the teacher's role? Okay, in the cognitive code approach. Here, the teacher builds on what the students already know. The teacher helps the students relate to new material, themselves, their life experiences, and their previous knowledge. Teacher avoids rote learning and uses graphic and procedures to clarify relationships. Yes, so teachers are able to reflect on their ways of doing things in the classroom to facilitate student learning, subordinating teaching to learning. What is the student's role in the cognitive code approach? Yes, here, being engaged in this method, students think, learn how to express informed opinion, talk for purpose and for fun, listen and train pronunciation. Yes. So the student acquires greater responsibility for their own learning. Learners learn from their own errors and learning in new knowledge with prior knowledge. What are the activities and techniques of cognitive code approach? Here, you have some activities and techniques that the teachers can use, in their classroom while they are using cognitive code approach, such as remembering and applying information, constructing sentences and paragraphs, editing written work, paraphrasing, using both text and picture, making mind maps, visualization, using clues in reading comprehension, scanning, and self-testing. What is the strength of the cognitive code learning theory? Yes, there are advantages as well as disadvantages of cognitive learning theory. While the advantages, it's a good foundation for elementary level. The graph phonemic can be the best for this level. Yes, a cognitive code approach revived the re-emergence of grammar in the classroom. It is the rule-governed nature of language. There is language acquisition rather than habit formation. It emphasized on the learning of the rules via meaningful practice and creativity. It focuses on the individual student and their learning process and progress. Yes. So the ultimate aim of a cognitive approach is to model speaker knowledge in ways which are consistent with the two key commitments which underlie the cognitive linguistic enterprise. Yes. And what is the weakness of cognitive code learning theory? Weakness, here, disadvantages of cognitive learning theory is that it's limited to teacher only. It is a teacher-based learning. So whatever the teacher's knowledge, that's the only things they can learn. So a cognitive code learning theory is theoretical proposal, ignores past experiences, depersonalized theory. Yes. Another important criticism is that biology, genetics, culture, and past experience have not been sufficiently tested as factors in mental processing. Yes. To sum up what we discussed about cognitive code approach, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around it. The second part of this lecture is about affective humanistic approach. The outlines here, theoretical background, definition, principles, factors, theory of language, theory of learning, design, characteristics of affective humanistic approach, advantages and disadvantages of affective humanistic approach. Just try to think about this question and why humanistic approach emerged. Why a humanistic approach emerged? Yeah, humanistic approach emerged to eliminate the limitations of ideolingual, behavioristic, and cognitive approach as cognitivist. Also, humanistic approach view of the human being made up of a house consisting of mind, body, emotion, and spirit. But the traditional view of the student, our educational system is generally focused on the first floor, where we deal with observable data, information, focused on skills and knowledge, base so that young people can become good employees, workers, and providers for their families, what we might call a success in life. Yes, theoretical background of affective humanistic approach here. In this approach, language learning is a process of self-realization, respect for each individual's feelings emphasized, for both teacher and students. Class atmosphere is more important than methods or materials. In this approach, priority given to personally meaningful communication. Instruction often involves pair or small group work. A teacher is a counselor or facilitator instead of the ultimate source of knowledge, and translation can be used especially in the early stages. Yes, Abraham Maslow, 1943, proposed this theory on human motivation, humanistic approach. Yes, what is humanism? The definition of a humanism. Yeah, humanism is originally a psychological term. It emphasizes the importance of the inner world of the human being and places the individual's thoughts, feelings, emotions. What is a humanistic approach? The definition of a humanistic approach. Humanistic approach is a language teaching method which emphasizes humanism as the most significant element in the teaching process. So, this approach focuses on the development of self-concept, interpersonal relationships, intrinsic motivation, improved thought patterns, personal and social responsibility, and other qualities of good character. This approach, also called the psychoeducational approach. What is the basic principle of a humanistic approach in English language teaching? Yes. Humanistic approach in English language teaching is an attempt to respond to these needs. Its basic principle is in shifting the focus in education from teaching to learning. So, by this way, the learner becomes as a backbone of the process of teaching and learning. The teacher is a counselor, a facilitator in the classroom. What are the principles of a humanistic approach? Yes, there are 5 basic principles of a humanistic education or humanistic approach. The first one is the goal of education should be to foster students' desire to learn and teach them how to learn. Students should be self-motivated in their studies and desire to learn on their own. Another principle of this approach is that humanistic educators insist that schools need to provide students with a non-threatening environment so that they will feel secure to learn. Once students feel secure, learning becomes easier and more meaningful. Yes. Also, humanistic educators believe that grades are irrelevant and that only self-evaluation is meaningful. Grading encourages students to work for a grade and not for personal satisfaction. Moreover, humanistic educators are opposite to objective tests because they test a student's ability to memorize and don't provide sufficient educational feedback to the teacher and the student. Humanistic educators also believe that both feelings and knowledge are important to the learning process. Unlike traditional educators, humanistic teachers don't separate the cognitive and affective domains. Okay, the last principle of this approach is that students should be able to choose what they want to learn. Humanistic teachers believe that students will be motivated to learn a subject if it's something they need and want to know. What are some important affective factors in humanistic approach? Yes. The important affective factors in a humanistic approach are anxiety, self-esteem, which means a kind of self-judgment of worth or value, the language ego, which refers to the relation between people, feelings of personal identity, individual uniqueness, and value of their first language, and empathy, which means putting oneself into someone else's shoes, of reaching beyond others' feeling. Just think about this question. What makes affective humanistic approach unique? What makes affective humanistic approach unique? Yeah. Affective humanistic approach sees the human being as a whole person. The content is decided by the student. The information and learning that takes place appeals to what the student hopes to gain and learn. Also, it depends less on materials, techniques, and linguistic analysis, and more on what goes on inside and between people in the classroom. Affective humanistic approach as theory of learning. It is constructivist. Affective humanistic approach sees individuals as different from each other in terms of psychological and social side. So as learners, we have individual differences among learners according to psychological and social side. Theory of language, yes. Affective humanistic approach is structural and functional. It includes structural functional activities. It gives importance to forms and meaning. Students learn only when language is meaningful for them. Yes, design of affective humanistic approach, yes, includes objectives, syllabus, activities, the learner rules, the teacher rules, the rule of instructional material. Yes, the objectives of affective humanistic approach here. Yes, students will learn best what they want and need to know. Knowing how to learn is more important than acquiring a lot of knowledge. Self-evaluation is the only meaningful evaluation of a student's work. Feelings are as important as facts and thoughts. Students learn best in a non-threatening environment. What is the teacher's role? Yes, according to affective humanistic approach, Teacher allows the student to have a choice in the selection of tasks and activities whenever possible. Teacher helps the students learn to set realistic goals. Teachers have students participate in group work, especially cooperative learning, in order to develop social and affective skills. Yes, teachers act as facilitators for group discussion when appropriate. Yes, teacher, is a role model for the attitudes, beliefs, and habits, you wish to foster for your students. What is the learner rules? Yes, what is the learner's rule here? Learners are autonomous. They learn what they want. They are director as they shape their activities and group works. Syllabus, in affective humanistic, according to affective humanistic approach, students are given the freedom to determine and identify their learning, and they study language which they find meaningful and relevant to them. They gain benefit from it. Therefore, they learn whatever form of language that they see important for them. Yes. So, humanistic curriculum supports the idea of individualism, helping students discover who they are, not just shaping them into a form that has been designated in advance. Yes. What kind of curriculum activities appearing in this approach, affective humanistic approach? Lessons are based on life experiences, group games, group projects, dramatizations, field trips, learning and interest centers, homework and tutoring stations. These activities include creative problem solving and active student participation. Yes. Another learning teaching activities in the affective humanistic approach is that learning together. Teacher identifies 4 to 6 students, have a worksheet. Students must learn or complete together. They encourage to help each other. No competition among groups, like these activities. Yes. What is the role of instructional materials in affective humanistic approach? Bringing variety and creativity to the use of materials and activities used in a class is the most facile and fun way of keeping the motivation level high in a language class. Materials such as visually attractive handouts, worksheets, a flip chart, real object, authentic objects, newspapers, audiovisual aids. What are the characteristics of affective humanistic approach? Here we have, some characteristics of this approach as follows. They should be respect for both teacher and the students and their feelings. Meaningful communication is emphasized. Pair and group and small group work are emphasized. It is important for students to support each other. Learning a foreign language is a self-realization experience. Teacher is like a counselor, a facilitator, and should be proficient in the target language and the student's native language. Also, translation can be used in initial stages to support positive feelings of the students. Yes, what are the advantages of affective humanistic approach? Yes, here we have some advantages of affective humanistic approach, such as it improves cooperativeness, creativity, and independence. It increases positive attitudes towards teacher and school. It develops a stress-free environment. It reflects a holistic, affective, and student-centered view of language learning. It promotes self-confidence. Teachers can use music, art, and action to make the class interesting and lively. Yes, disadvantages of this approach. Humanistic teachers aim for good things, but these are not clearly defined. Humanistic approach is highly dependent upon the capabilities of the teacher. Teachers should be proficient in in both languages, target and the mother tongue, language. It requires careful preparation of materials, by the teachers. Some members or some students dominate and others are ignored. So, language teaching and learning is a complex process. In this process, what to learn and how to learn are influenced by the cognitive motivation. Yet, yes, cognitive motivation is determined by individuals' affect. So, in language teaching, teachers should always bear the affective factors in their minds and put students in the first place. Then they may achieve the success in language teaching. The honeymoon of humanistic approaches was short-lived. The problem was that humanism in English language teaching had become associated with topics such as psychodrama. Okay, at the end of this lecture, just try to answer this assignment and send it for me. Yes, what is the difference between ideolingual approach and cognitive code approach? Yes, thank you, and I hope best wishes and success for you.